Welcome to History as Old. Rise as we open our journey into Rome's dramatic conquest of ancient Britain, a clash between imperial ambition and tribal resilience. The Roman Empire, driven by expansion and glory, gazed across the Channel toward a land of fierce Celtic warriors, sacred groves, and impenetrable forests. Britain was no passive frontier. It was a world of proud tribes and deeply rooted traditions. As legions sharpened their swords and ships prepared for the crossing, Celtic tribes strengthened their hill forts and rallied around their chieftains. Guided by ancestral gods, they vowed to resist foreign domination. The storm of conquest was coming. What unfolded would become one of history's most compelling struggles, an empire's iron discipline colliding with a land's fierce independence and untamed spirit. Before Rome set its sights on Britain, the empire was at its height under Emperor Claudius. Political ambition blended with military necessity, as Claudius sought a bold conquest to solidify his authority. Britain, rich in metals and trade routes, offered both economic and symbolic value. Rome wanted dominance, and Claudius desired a triumph that would cement his legacy for generations. Preparations intensified across Gaul. Quartermasters gathered supplies, engineers crafted siege engines, and commanders studied the terrain of this distant island. Rome viewed Britain as a challenge worth conquering, remote, mysterious, and filled with warriors famed for their ferocity. The invasion would require precision, discipline, and overwhelming force. Claudius knew that the eyes of the entire empire would judge the results of this campaign. Before Rome landed, Britain thrived with diverse Celtic tribes such as the Trinovantes, Catuvellani, Iceni, and Brigantes. These tribes lived in fortified hill settlements, worshipped powerful gods, and upheld warrior traditions passed through generations. Their society valued bravery, kinship, and honor. Leadership came from charismatic chieftains whose authority rested on loyalty and courage rather than imperial hierarchy. Though fierce, the tribes were far from united. Rivalries often erupted into conflict, weakening their resistance against outside threats. Druids held spiritual power, guiding both political and religious life. Britain was rich with culture, but its fragmentation left it vulnerable. When Rome prepared to strike, some tribes saw opportunity in alliance, while others vowed to defend their ancestral lands to the last breath. Nearly a century before Claudius, Julius Caesar attempted to subdue Britain. In 55 BC, he launched a bold but limited expedition. Fierce storms battered his ships, and Celtic warriors attacked relentlessly along the shoreline. Though Caesar secured a foothold, British resistance and harsh weather denied him lasting control. His campaign became a reconnaissance rather than a conquest. Caesar returned in 54 BC with greater force, forcing several tribes to pledge loyalty. Yet he withdrew once again, understanding the island's difficulty. Britain remained unconquered, but Caesar's reports captivated Rome with tales of painted warriors, chariots, and dense forests. These writings ignited a fascination that later emperors would pursue with far greater determination and military strength. In AD 43, Emperor Claudius issued the command that would change Britain forever. 4 legions, massive, disciplined, and expertly trained, were assembled under General Aulus Plautius. Their objective was unmistakable: conquer Britain and bring it into Rome's imperial fold. The force included infantry, cavalry, engineers, and auxiliaries from across the empire, forming a formidable invasion army. Storms delayed their crossing, but once the weather cleared, Rome launched its greatest effort yet. Ships packed with soldiers, horses, and equipment departed Gaul in waves. The Celts watched from across the Channel, uncertain of Rome's intentions. This was no raid. It was the beginning of a full-scale campaign that would reshape the island's fate for centuries to come. When the Roman fleet finally reached Britain, soldiers disembarked onto unfamiliar shores. The Celts launched sudden assaults, striking from forests and marshes with swift chariots. Roman discipline held firm despite the shock of terrain and tactics. The legions formed tight ranks, repelling attacks while engineers secured a beachhead. This opening clash revealed the island's harsh environment and determined defenders. Roman commanders quickly adapted, reinforcing positions and pushing inland with calculated precision. Their heavy armor and coordinated formations contrasted sharply with Britain's unpredictable ambushes. Yet every step was contested by warriors who knew the land better than any map could show. The invasion had begun in earnest, and both sides realized this war would be long, grueling, and transformative. The first major confrontation occurred at the River Medway, where British tribes attempted to block Rome's advance. Skilled swimmers crossed the river stealthily, surprising the Celts and breaking their defensive line. Roman auxiliaries, trained for rapid assaults, pushed forward with relentless energy. The Celts counterattacked fiercely, fighting with spears, slings, and chariots to hold their ground. But Roman discipline gradually overwhelmed tribal courage. As more legions crossed the river, the Celts were forced into retreat. The battle showcased Rome's tactical flexibility and the advantage of well-coordinated troops. The Medway victory opened the path deeper into Britain, signaling that the conquest was gaining momentum. Still, resistance remained strong, and the tribes refused to surrender their homeland. Pursuing the retreating tribes, Roman forces advanced to the River Thames. The Britons had prepared traps beneath the shallow water, sharpened stakes hidden in mud. Charging cavalry were halted, causing chaos. Yet Roman scouts identified safer routes, and infantry advanced cautiously. The Celtic defenders hurled spears from riverbanks, determined to slow the imperial advance at any cost. Once the Romans established footing, the Celts withdrew to avoid encirclement. The river crossing demonstrated the ingenuity and adaptability of both sides. Rome persisted with patience and discipline, while the Britons showed strategic foresight and knowledge of the land. With the Thames behind them, the legions pressed on toward tribal capitals, knowing the resistance would stiffen as they neared powerful kingdoms. To secure political prestige, Emperor Claudius personally traveled to Britain after major victories had been won. Accompanied by elite troops, elephants, and advisors, his arrival signaled Rome's commitment to total conquest. The symbolism mattered. An emperor rarely joined campaigns, but Claudius sought legitimacy. British tribes observed this spectacle with awe and tension, recognizing the scale of Roman ambition. Under his presence, Roman forces pushed north and captured Camulodunum, the stronghold of powerful tribes. Claudius accepted formal surrender from several chiefs, marking the first major submission of Britain. With his goals achieved, he returned to Rome triumphantly. But for the island, the conquest was far from over. Many tribes still resisted fiercely, refusing to abandon their ancestral independence. Camulodunum became the first Roman capital in Britain, transformed from a tribal stronghold into a symbol of imperial authority. Temples, forums, and barracks sprang up rapidly. The Romans installed loyal tribal leaders and stationed a permanent garrison to secure the region. Roads connected the settlement to other strategic points, marking the early foundations of Roman Britain. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The conquered tribes watched these changes with resentment. Forced labor and heavy taxation fueled anger, while Roman cultural imposition threatened traditional Celtic identity. Camulodunum stood as both a triumph and a spark of future rebellion. The seeds of resistance were quietly taking root, waiting for a leader who would ignite the island. The Druids of Britain were powerful spiritual leaders who guided tribal decisions, preserved cultural memory, and inspired resistance. Their stronghold was the island of Mona, a sacred center of ritual and learning. Rome viewed the Druids as dangerous, capable of uniting scattered tribes into coordinated defiance. Eliminating them became a strategic necessity for securing long-term control. Roman commanders launched an assault on Mona, confronting fierce warriors and chanting priests who invoked divine wrath. Despite determined resistance, Roman discipline prevailed. Sacred groves were destroyed, and the Druidic influence began to weaken. Yet the loss of Mona stirred deep anger among the tribes. Rome had struck not just a military target, but the spiritual heart of Celtic Britain. Among the tribes, no figure would symbolize resistance like Boudica, queen of the Iceni. After her husband's death, Rome violated agreements, seized lands, and humiliated her and her daughters. The brutality ignited a fury that echoed across Britain. Boudica vowed vengeance and rallied tribes with powerful speeches, invoking ancestral pride and the right to freedom. Her charisma united thousands who had suffered under Roman oppression. Displaced farmers, warriors, and clan leaders gathered under her banner. She became the embodiment of resistance, fearless, determined, and guided by righteous anger. Rome underestimated her resolve, unaware that a storm was building that would threaten the very foundations of their control in Britain. Boudica struck swiftly. Her forces attacked Camulodunum, burning the city and wiping out the Roman garrison. Survivors fled in terror as temples and homes crumbled. The rebellion spread like wildfire, with tribe after tribe joining her cause. Roman officials underestimated the scale of the uprising, leaving settlements vulnerable and poorly defended. Next, her army marched on Londinium. The Roman governor, fearing annihilation, evacuated the town, leaving it to its fate. Boudica's warriors razed it completely. Mass destruction followed at Verulamium, where thousands perished. Britain had erupted in a full-scale revolt unmatched in its ferocity. Rome realized that only decisive military action could prevent the loss of the entire province. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, an experienced commander, regrouped surviving Roman forces. He gathered legions from scattered posts and formed a unified army capable of challenging Boudica. Recognizing the rebellion's scale, he prepared to fight a decisive battle. Suetonius knew that if Boudica won again, Roman authority in Britain would collapse entirely. Supplies were secured, formations drilled, and morale restored. Suetonius carefully chose terrain that would neutralize the Celtic numerical advantage. His strategy relied on discipline rather than brute force. As his troops assembled, word spread that Boudica's massive army was approaching. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic confrontations in ancient British history. Boudica's army, numbering in the tens of thousands, marched with burning determination. Families followed in wagons, eager to witness Rome's defeat. Suetonius positioned his legions in a narrow valley, protecting their flanks. When the Celts charged, the Romans hurled volleys of javelins, cutting deep into their front lines. The initial momentum of the Celts quickly met disciplined resistance. Roman formations advanced methodically, shields interlocked, pushing back the massive horde. Celtic warriors fought with bravery, but chaos overwhelmed their ranks as escape routes clogged with wagons. The Romans exploited the disorder, delivering decisive blows. By day's end, the rebels were crushed. Boudica's fate remains uncertain, but her revolt became a symbol of British defiance for centuries to come. After the revolt, Rome tightened its control. Forts were reinforced, roads expanded, and loyal tribal leaders installed. Rome learned that conquest without stability invited rebellion. Administrators imposed law, taxation, and new governance structures. The legions patrolled tirelessly, ensuring peace through a combination of force and strategic diplomacy. Britain gradually adapted to the rhythms of Roman order. Trade flourished, bringing wealth and new opportunities, but cultural tensions persisted. Romanization advanced in towns while rural tribes maintained traditional ways. The conquest entered a new phase, not of open warfare, but of integration and negotiation. Britain was now officially a province of Rome, shaped by both conflict and cooperation in the years that followed. Roman influence reshaped Britain through the construction of towns such as Londinium, Verulamium, and Eboracum. Streets followed grid patterns, with markets, baths, temples, and administrative buildings. These urban centers brought new lifestyles, from fresh trade networks to organized courts and public forums. Britain shifted from scattered tribal settlements to thriving provincial cities connected by advanced infrastructure. Skilled laborers, both Roman and local, contributed to this transformation. As architecture changed, so did society. Wealthy Britons adopted Roman customs, attire, and language, blending cultures in unique ways. Life became more interconnected, with goods from across the empire flowing through British ports. Rome's stamp on the landscape became unmistakable and enduring. Decades later, Rome sought to secure the northern frontier from hostile tribes in Caledonia. Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of a monumental barrier, Hadrian's Wall. Stretching across northern Britain, it was fortified with towers, gates, and forts. The wall represented both a physical defense and a symbol of imperial power, marking the edge of Rome's controlled world. Soldiers stationed along the wall lived rigorous lives, guarding against raids and maintaining discipline. Trade and cultural exchange occurred through controlled gateways. While not impenetrable, the wall stabilized the region and showcased Rome's engineering might. It remains one of the most iconic remnants of Roman Britain, standing as testimony to an empire's determination to define and defend its borders. Over time, Roman culture blended with native traditions. Britons adopted Roman clothing, coins, pottery, and agricultural methods. Temples honored both Roman and Celtic gods. Villas dotted the countryside, showcasing new architecture and luxuries. Education and literacy expanded, bringing new ideas into tribal communities. This cultural fusion created a unique Romano-British identity. Yet Rome never fully erased Celtic heritage. Rural clans preserved ancestral customs, festivals, and languages. Life varied dramatically between Romanized towns and independent countryside. Britain became a province where two worlds coexisted: imperial order and ancient tradition. The balance between them shaped everyday life for centuries and influenced the island long after Rome withdrew. Rome's conquest of Britain left a legacy that endured long after the legions departed in the 5th century. Roads, cities, laws, and architecture shaped the island's foundations. The clash between empire and tribal freedom became part of Britain's enduring story. Through conflict, adaptation, and exchange, Rome transformed Britain into a province tied to the wider ancient world. But the Celts also left their mark: resistance, cultural resilience, and powerful legends that survived empire. The story of Roman Britain is one of confrontation and coexistence, defining centuries of history. As we look back, the echoes of those battles remind us how empires rise and fall, but identities endure. Britain was forever changed, but never fully conquered in spirit.